Microsoft's got this super intense culture where the answer is usually yes.
No, not going, leave me alone.
That's a different kind of no and requires...
How do you say no?
Have I said no to Satya? I tend to say yes to him most of the time. That's not what courageous leadership is. Courageous leadership is...
Do you have any stories of how when you had to say no to Satya Nadella, or when somebody had to say no to you?
Yeah, well, they say no to me, time, and it becomes a discussion as to the why, right? Why is it a no? And if it makes sense, I have infinite patience for that. If it doesn't make sense and there's a way to get what we need done, then fine. But I find for the most part, Microsoft's got this super intense culture where the answer is usually yes. And I've been having to coach people to say no more often. In fact, I sent out a note just last week to everybody to remind them to say no more often, especially to things like internal meetings where we sort of spin up a lot of work and it's not adding any value to customers. Have I said no to Satya? I tend to say yes to him most of the time.
Yeah.
Do
you want to hear something really crazy? 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. It'll literally take you 1 second and you'll get notified when more videos just like this one are available. Now, let's get back to the content.
How do you say no? So you mentioned you sent out this email that said, hey, it's okay to say no, but there's probably like a right way to say no and a wrong way to say no, right? I mean, you don't want to come off as a jerk and, you invite me to a meeting and I say, no, not going, leave me alone. Probably not a good thing to say.
You know what? You just find the alternative that's going to work. So if it's being present at a meeting and I have a conflict, whether it's, a super important customer meeting, some other engagement or, a medical appointment or something like that, you simply find who would be the best alternative and you offer that up. I've never had anybody push back and say that's totally unacceptable. And when they do, we end up changing the meeting socket to be when I can be there. So I think it's having the answer. If it's no about, hey, a direction that we're taking the business, like, hey, I want you to take the hill. And it's like, no, I think we should take that hill. Then that's a different kind of no and requires, sort of a more subtle approach based and rooted in facts, with a great storyline. And then the courage to rumble through it. Right. And I think that's what everybody's sort of learning is, and that's certainly what I've signed on to have my teams at Microsoft learn, is how do you have the courage to rumble through when you disagree fundamentally with something very strategic and important and maybe even emotional, maybe even existential. And how do we have that tough conversation and how do we come out of it with trust and with a tighter relationship and clarity?
Well, I'm glad you brought up courage because that was one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. And I know you wrote an article about this on your LinkedIn page a little while ago. So how would you explain or define courage and why is it so important for leaders to have courage?
Yeah, so there are so many definitions of it, but basically for me, courage is, the willingness to take the leap, to take the risk, and own all the consequences. And the reason why it's so important is because there's just so much going on that, the world is changing so much that if we just look for places where we don't need courage and we can just be comfortable, then we're really not going to rise up to the challenge. I certainly, as a change leader, wouldn't be rising to the challenge of what my job requires for success. And one of the things that, we've been learning is the connection between courage and vulnerability. So everybody thinks of, if you're courageous, you have no weakness.
Yeah.
You are strong. They picture warriors, with lots of armor and, heading off. That's not what courageous leadership is. Courageous leadership is, the willingness to activate the troops and own the outcome, but also to do so bringing all of your strengths and weaknesses to the table with total transparency and clarity, and kind of owning up to that and figuring out how to assemble, the team to bolster wherever there are weaknesses. And that's a different kind of leadership that I think is essential today.